Hello and welcome. You are watching Visible Futures. This is the second of the channels for the Silvertree Consulting. I am Dr. Brian Cross. I am the founder and principal at Silvertree. And what Visible Futures is the channel where I will talk about new and emerging technologies and the role that they are likely to play in your life and business. So, to kick us off, I wanted to talk a little bit about generative AI or Gen AI. If you have heard or been part of discussions around AI or artificial intelligence for the past year or so, it is likely that those conversations have involved or been about generative AI as a form of artificial intelligence. Now, when we talk about generative AI, briefly, what we're talking about is a computer program and a form of artificial intelligence that has been trained on a large body of data that then enables that program to generate new outputs from what it was trained on. This is sometimes referred to as neural AI, and the basic assumption or basic underlying way it works is you put a bunch of stuff into it, data, information, images, and then it takes the prompts you give it and looks through those things and tries to give you the best possible output that is not something that it already has, right? So it does create something new, but the newness is wildly dependent upon the data that it has been trained on. I will include a link to an article that explains this in more detail for those of you who want to get technical and into the weeds. But for the most part, what you should know is these are the platforms like ChatGPT, Llama, Dolly, Crayon that you likely are at least somewhat familiar with, if not in use. And the reason that Gen AI gets talked about is that it has been shown to work for a variety of different input types, including writing, art, business functions, manufacturing, and healthcare. So it certainly has a lot of potential applications. So then why am I talking about it in a way that says maybe there's some problems here? Well, there are ethical issues around all artificial intelligence, and Gen AI is not exempt from these. Gen AI has some unique issues as well. The primary one being the training data that is used to train these intelligent agents, which is often used without people's knowledge. And sometimes, depending upon the kind of output you get, looks an awful lot like plagiarism. Um, there are concerns around the massive amount of energy that is required to train and operate these programs. And then there are questions around existing algorithmic bias, that the data that is used sometimes has biases in it. And when it is used to train these programs, those biases are trained in as well. Um, the other thing that has happened recently, and this is sort of where I come in, is Data and Society, which is an organization that is dedicated to really deploying sociotechnical expertise in new and emerging technologies, recently issued a call for people with sociotechnical expertise, with a knowledge of how technology, sociotechnical just basically means how does a new technology impact various social institutions like the family, like work and employment, politics, economy, right? These things that we have created, social institutions that we have created as humans, how do new technologies impact them? And one of the concerns raised by Data and Society is that currently the debate and the discussion around these technologies lacks this sort of socio-technical expertise. Most of the voices that you hear discussing generative AI are either tech entrepreneurs or engineers. Neither group has a particular investment in looking at the socio-technical impacts here. And in terms of, well, why do we need, who cares what the social scientists think, right? Well, it turns out all of us should, because new technologies don't just do what they are supposed to do. They often come with unintended consequences or knock-on effects that can change the way that we relate to one another, the institutions that we interact with, and our day-to-day lives. So when we talk about this is what is sometimes called SCOT, or the social construction of technology. And it argues that even the technologies that we are creating, such as generative AI, are not created sort of in a value-free space. There are inputs that go into their creation, and we need to examine and understand those, as well as the way that it gets used, a new technology gets used once it is released to the public or allowed to interact with a wider variety of users. So I have a quote by Kirkpatrick, who is a sociotechnical scholar there, saying, "Technology is actively shaped by social actors who invest it with meanings and bend it to the desires and interests of non-technical forms of collective life." That's basically PhD nerd speak for you give people a piece of technology and they are going to start using it in ways that you never intended for it to be used. They're going to use it in a way that works for them, not necessarily in the way that you intended for it to be used. So again, when we look at generative AI, you really are seeing two, maybe three voices dominating the discourse here in terms of what this can do and what's it likely to do and how it should be used. Primary amongst them are engineers and the tech investors and tech executives that are running the companies that are producing these generative AI products. I also have their tech evangelists. Yes, they are talking about it, but in general, tech evangelists don't really add much to the conversation. These are the people who get really hyped up anytime there's a new product announcement from Apple. They're just going to see it all as good, and they tend to view it uncritically. So we're just going to go and toss them to the side. So what we're really seeing are two different stories. The stories being told by the people who are creating these things, who are coding them, who are doing sort of the hard work of bringing them into existence. The engineers that are really focused on the more pro-social use cases, right? Engineers like to find a problem and solve it. They see generative AI as something that can solve a lot of problems. But the actual use of the product and the reason we're seeing a lot of investment in this is being driven more by profit-seeking motives, those that align with the investors and tech executives that are underwriting and financing the creation of generative AI. So when we look at generative AI, there is a lot of claims that it is going to be good for us, right? That it has tremendous potential, right? It can potentially do all these things, and that it just needs time to get better, right? And that if you're criticizing it now, you're at the worst part of it, and it's only going to get better from here. As somebody with training in sociotechnical phenomena, let me tell you, be skeptical of this, right? Certainly, the engineers are excited. For many engineers, the promise of generative AI is one that is going to solve a lot of problems. It will, according to the sort of the people who are really invested in the positive use cases here, it's going to create a personalized tech that knows us better and is able to sort of respond to our needs and really do tailored sort of suggestions, basically a personal digital assistant. It has the potential to provide us with customized high-end entertainment. So you prompt into one of these engines and it will give you a book. It will give you a movie. It will give you an entire video game just by sort of slamming together the various elements it's been trained on along with the prompts that you give it. We like when technology promises to reduce repetitive or tedious work tasks, right? No one likes doing these. That is why they are repetitive and tedious. And if we can outsource it to a technology, cool, right? And then it also has the potential to lead to new medical advances, new breakthroughs in drugs and therapies. as well as accelerating the progress of gene therapies, because it's able to sort of rip through large amounts of data at very fast speeds and make the sort of connections that it might take a human much longer to make. This sounds great, right? Awesome. I would love my Gen AI to do this. But there is another narrative here, one that sees this as purely a source of profit. Specifically, they see generative AI as something that will reduce labor costs. We should always be skeptical when we see people talking about reducing labor costs. And the first thing you want to ask there is whose labor and how are they likely to be impacted? And this is not an answer we've really gotten yet. In terms of sort of the specific use cases that investors and tech executives see for generative AI, they see it as increasing production speed and increased precision on creative tasks. This is another one that can get a bit iffy. What a lot of people have interpreted that to mean is no longer hiring people who do art or layout or design sorts of things, but instead outsourcing that to a machine that has been trained on those other people's creative output, but for which they have not been compensated. There's also already, it's being used for deeper insights into large data sets. This is some of the health applications that engineers are excited about, and also advanced forecasting for various financial markets. There's a handful of other ones, but these are sort of the main ones. Now, I want to say we should be skeptical of both major narratives, because these are stories we have heard before for other forms of technology. These are not new explanations that have come with generative AI. And the reason we should be skeptical is a term that Cory Doctorow coined in January 2023 called enshittification. Hopefully I am far enough in that the YouTube algorithm isn't going to boot this, but if it does, so be it. We're presumably adults here. And enshittification, and I've got the definition that Doctorow offered there, but basically it is a process by which a new technology rolls out, makes promises to customers and users. They like this thing, but over time, the functionality, the usefulness, the user friendliness of the technology begins to degrade as the company that offers it is more invested in figuring out how to monetize it and sell it to business customers, whether those be advertisers or people that are interested in purchasing large amounts of data for scraping. And then the end stage in Doctorow's sort of encapsulation here is that then the process that happened for users where the experience became crappier over time also happens for the business customers. And what you usually then see is if you want, either as a business customer or as a regular non-paying or minimally paying user, the old experience, you have to then pay increasing tiers of pricing to get that old valuation, that old functionality back. Think about things like Amazon's recent pivot to putting ads into Prime, right? Prime did not used to have ads. Now it does, but you can pay more money if you'd like to not get those ads. But it's only probably a matter of time before that new paid tier will also get those ads. This is what Doctorow means when he talks about enshittification. So we've seen this in existing examples. Almost every tech innovation that has come to us in the last 20 to 25 years has fallen prey to enshittification. Social media platforms, mobile apps, e-commerce sites, video games, crypto, all of these things to some degree suck more now than they used to. The experience of using them is more onerous now than it used to be. And they all went through a phase where they were more usable by business interests, but that also tends to wane so that you get tech companies that are providing a service that no one really likes, but everyone feels like they're trapped into using. to some degree or another. So what this looks like, and this is, let me be clear, when we talk about investors and tech executives, they're the ones that are doing this in shitification, right? The model here is one where there is a new product or service. There's a sort of a hype train, those tech evangelists. And then the product is rolled out, often in a incomplete or broken state. And actual users are the ones who end up beta testing this. Holler to Steam and it's early access. Why pay actual testers when you can have gamers do it for you for free? The technology will change as feedback comes in, but it is often unclear whose feedback is being used. And then over time, what we tend to see for these technologies is that improvements that are made overwhelmingly to favor business interests, not user interests. The platform becomes optimized to generate revenue, not to provide whatever service it initially may have, and the user experience suffers. Generating interest then and need for a new product and service, which oftentimes the same companies will provide for you, just in a less and shitified way for now. So coming back to GenAI, why is it reasonable to think that this is the direction GenAI will go in? Well, let's look at who is currently making decisions about how AI is built, deployed, and updated. It is not those engineers. They work for people who are making those decisions. It is almost entirely being made by market and capital considerations by the executives, again, whose motivation here is not to provide a user experience, but it is to make money. And the way they have currently figured out how to do that is through this process of enshittification, right? GenAI currently is not even a tool that makes your life better. It is a tool that currently is making wealthy tech executives and investors more wealthy. Awesome, right? So why is this bad? Well, users and consumers get left out of this loop. We're the people that are using these things, but we don't have a very strong voice in how they get made and used. We should want technology that makes things better for all users, not just those with a financial interest. I'm sure, well, I'm not sure, but it is likely that somebody's going to show up in the comments to argue that, hey, bro, this is just business. Yeah, it is, but it doesn't have to be. We could have better technology that works for us. We don't have to let the people who are only interested in money make all of the decisions for how our future is going to look. The other concern here is, as I started with, there are major ethical concerns around generative AI, but the people who currently are making decisions do not care because it is not profitable to care about these ethical things. And they are in a short-term profit-driven mindset, so they are not really incentivized to look at these ethical concerns, which often are pegged onto longer-term or longer timelines than the next quarterly report. So when we talk about these problems, I already mentioned the training data, right? That these generative AI systems are trained using data generated by people who often do not know that their data is being used. You're seeing something of a mini gold rush currently with the major players in artificial intelligence trying to gobble up as much content platforms as possible. So they want something like Facebook. Meta's already got a head start here because they have Facebook, they have Instagram. They can scrape all the content on those platforms to train their AI. You've seen the purchase recently of a number of different forums like Reddit or niche hobby forums by companies that do AI work with the intention, presumably, of using the content that users create on those platforms to train their AI. Anyone who has spent time in the darker corners of Reddit probably is shuddering right now at the thought of an AI trained on some of the more odious subreddits. There's also a question around energy usage. Currently, anytime you pop over to Crayon or DALL-E and you have it, prompted to draw up whatever funny thing crossed your mind, That is basically the energy equivalent of running a large appliance in your house for about a half hour. You scale this up to millions of users making millions of requests every day, and you're really putting in a lot of energy for what is ostensibly sort of a toy for people right now. Bigger uses of this AI use increasingly larger amounts of energy as well. We talked a little bit already about algorithmic bias. Again, the data that is used is not always cleaned, and there's also a question of how that cleaning occurs. And we have found in almost all of these so far significant biases, the sorts of ones that have historically been a problem in our societies, but it is unfortunate that they are getting replicated over, oftentimes because it's just not cost effective to do the proper cleaning and checking of the data sets. Again, there is this likelihood of platform decay, which is the polite term for enshittification, but the idea that we will never see the full promise of this technology because it's just not market feasible to do so. It is more profitable to roll out a crippled or broken version of this technology and let people pay for marginal upgrades. And then there is this question of unequal access and benefits. All of us are being used to train this, but not all of us will benefit from it. And the benefits right now are more than likely to accrue to people who already have a lot. And we can see generative AI exacerbating existing inequalities. There's also some smaller problems, and I want to be clear here. Some of you are looking at this maybe and going, those don't look small. By smaller, I mean currently they are less pressing. They are problems of longer term consequence for this technology, and it is not entirely clear that they are going to become significant problems. But they include things like job loss. Will this technology put people out of work? Privacy. What happens when you have data that you entered into a website thinking it was private that's now being used to train these machines? There is a lack of transparency in training and programming. We don't always know how they're made. And because of that, it makes it hard to understand how they are likely to respond or what problems may crop up in using them. I think in the next few months, as we get deeper into the US election, we're likely to see significant misinformation threats being posed by generative AI, probably in the form of deepfakes, whether these are video, audio, or images of political candidates doing, saying, or acting in ways that they never did, or whether it's just fake news, a story that is able to be generated in a matter of seconds that reads like it was made by an actual journalist, but is actually misinformation generated by a generative AI. And then finally, there is the sort of really icky criminal consequences here. We've already seen attempts to use deepfakes to create revenge porn, where bad actors have basically used images of actual people to train an AI to then create pornographic content featuring that person. And this gets particularly sticky when it is used to produce content that, if it were involving an actual person, would be child sexual abuse. So there are some very significant, very important issues here that we need to be addressing. And when I say we, I mean all of us, users entirely. So what can we then do? This is where I put on my other hat that comes from the other channel here and talk about sort of successful ways of challenging these sorts of new technologies and the hegemony that they might have. We can push for legal and policy solutions. There are organizations out there that are in the process of preparing lawsuits, which, I know a lot of people don't like the litigiousness of our society, but for these companies and corporations, they tend not to make change unless they are dragged through court to do so. The other way that we might see change happen here is through policy solutions, but we already have a most of our elected representatives are unfortunately not very tech savvy, and they tend to be beholden, at least in part, for donations to a lot of these tech companies. So policy solutions are a tough sort of path to go up. In general, we should be calling for more accountability. I will append into the description of this video a number of organizations that I have looked at that I think do good work in this area. And if you want to get involved, they have opportunities for volunteering. They take donations. There are ways to start to supercharge the building of this responsible tech approach. And then finally, we should be boycotting generative AI models that can't or won't engage in discussions about ethical use. I see this happening sort of sporadically, but the pushback is often lighten up, Francis. It's fun. It's not really hurting anybody. One of the things I hope that this video is able to do is provide some of you with tools to talk about this and talk about the real thorny questions and the potential harms that might come from these technologies if we don't have more of a collective ownership over how they are developed, deployed, and used. So if you're looking for organizations that are doing good work on AI activism, I have a number of them there. Probably the Algorithmic Justice League and the Electronic Frontier Foundation are two of the biggest ones. The other three do stuff, but they have not sort of spun up to the same degree. And then, as always, I hope you enjoyed the discussion we had here today. I say discussion, it's me talking at a camera. And again, I am Dr. Brian Remy Cross. I am the founder and principal of Silvertree Consultants. You can find all my contact information over there. And as well as links to some articles with more information on some of the things I talked about there. So thank you very much for watching this. If you liked what you heard, please consider liking and subscribing. And if you did not like what I had to say, or you have some argument, you can still like and subscribe, but feel free to drop me a line in the comments or send me a message on one of the various social media platforms. So I hope you found this educational and useful, and until next time, toodles.